Good afternoon and welcome to all of our ISM members and guests joining us today for our program on action-driven sustainability and procurement. We would also like to extend our thanks to all of our veterans to their service as we celebrate Veterans Day today. Please be sure to ask any questions of our speakers by using the chat or the Q&A tab. I would like to now turn the program over to Zhang, who is the co-founder of ETCH Sourcing, a Canada-based consultancy specializing in providing strategy and execution services in the sourcing, procurement, and category management space. At this point, I'd like to turn the stage over to you, Zhang.
Thanks so much, Kathy. And yes, we're super excited to be here today to speak on a topic that I know is very near and dear to all of our hearts. I'd like to start by introducing our panel today. I have the absolute distinct pleasure of being joined by two co-champions in the sustainable procurement space. So first off, we have Frances Edmonds, who is the head of sustainability at HP Canada. And she's been a huge champion for pushing organizations and collaborating with suppliers to really drive change in this space. And also Tim Herrod, who is the VP of Procurement at Albemarle and an absolute strong voice in setting standards around sustainability and really integrating that within business and financial standards. And someone that I personally very much respect when it comes to driving and moving businesses forward in this space. And like Kathy had said, we are very excited to be joining you guys today to speak on this topic. This is a topic that when Frances, Tim, and I came together, we really discussed, the fact that right now in today's industry, in today's space, organizations, businesses already understand that this is something that is happening. They understand that this is something that needs to happen. And what we really want to focus today's discussion on is, how do we make it happen? What are the actions that organizations can take? What are the steps that you can start taking today in your business to start to move and really accelerate your sustainable procurement transformation? So for that reason, we've chosen the format of a fireside chat. It's going to be, we have a couple of topics to touch on, but we really do strongly encourage all of our participants today to please send in your questions, send in information. If there's anything that you want us to expand on, to deep dive into, please do share that. Kathy and myself will both be monitoring the Q&A, so we make sure that we capture and touch on all the different topics here. But to get us started, the first topic that I think we had today that we really wanted to discuss was about level setting. Before we get into anything else, we really wanted to level set our definition of sustainable procurement. What do we mean when we talk about sustainable procurement? And there is an individual that we're all very familiar with, Bob Willard, who is also a very respected voice in sustainable procurement. And he has a definition that we all share very strongly in. And that's the definition of sustainable procurement as an activity that businesses really leverage to get the best value for money when purchasing the most sustainable goods and services from the most sustainable suppliers in support of an organization's stated purpose and strategic goals. So that's really important for us to make sure that we all understand that sustainable procurement is beyond green, it's beyond environment, it's beyond any of these topics. So we really wanted to make sure that we level set on that and to really get ourselves started. So maybe to start us off, we wanted to talk about a little bit on what are the steps that a company can start on. So I would like to open the floor now to Frances and Tim, who I know are just fighting at the tip to start talking about, some of the actions that they've seen. And we'll just open the floor there in terms of what activities can companies start today on implementing sustainable procurement in their organizations.
Okay, well, I'll jump in first. My first piece of advice is to not be letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. Many organizations feel they have to dot every I and cross every T on extensive policies and procedures before they can get started. It really is very simple. Tomorrow, you could, in your next bid document, simply add in, have the organizations that are choosing to bid on your RFPs, have they disclosed their measured and disclosed their carbon footprint, and have they set a Paris-based target for reduction? That would be sending at least one very strong signal straight away. You don't even necessarily need to score it, but you're sending a signal into the marketplace. In Canada, we have less than 40 Canadian companies that have set a science-based target for carbon reduction when we're in the decade of climate action. So this, working in a capitalist economy, what my customer asks me to do, I'm going to do. And so tomorrow, you can literally do that. That's a very simple first step. Obviously, there's much more, and I'm going to hand over to Tim and just let him build on that.
Thank you, Francis. So and that's a great, just in terms of a mindset. So the ability to start, we got to start somewhere, and then we can figure out the other, we can build it out into something okay, something good, something great as time goes on. I really like Francis' messages. The key is to start something. I'll come in from another angle, which is we have to position our function as a part of the solution, so that others in the company, when they think about, and there are various stakeholders, and I think it's one of the things with the sustainability, there are many internal stakeholders that have interest in this topic, and there are many stakeholders that have a view of how supplier engagement, supplier management, supplier risk should happen. And I think one of the earlier steps to take is establishing the mindset internally that procurement has a major role to play here in terms of value creation, integrated thinking, how sustainability has to fit into and sustainability, just to Jean, the Bob Willard definition as a sort of a true north or a North Star is very broad. So what it's going to mean for your organization and getting that mindset and your function sort of oriented to what it needs to mean, and getting those conversations going and really stepping up and saying, we do own a big part of how this happens, and we want to have a voice in how it's developed and created is very important. And we can talk about how to do that. But I think as a starting point, while we get targeted things we can move on, I think is very important.
Absolutely.
Can I just build on that? I was recently polling some customers in a presentation I did, and I asked them, how many of you as, say, IT professionals know that your organization has sustainability goals? Now, they knew they had some, but they didn't know what they were. They didn't know how what they do ties to those goals. So making sure that sustainability goals are well known throughout all of the lines of business who are doing buying, and then helping those lines of business see how the decisions they're making on what they're going to bid for, how they ask the questions are tied to those goals. And, in the same survey, more than half of the customers had never added weighted scoring on sustainability into their IT procurement bid documents. So lots of room for opportunity. And I really like this quote that comes from Tim at CCSP. Now they have a new name. I forget what it is, Jen. I'm sure you know it. But your best sustainable RFX is your next one. It's a continuous improvement. We're never going to be perfect to start off with.
Absolutely. And I think, one of the biggest things that we constantly push, all of our clients and all the organization that we work with is just to get started. It's something very simple, and you doesn't have to start with a very big, complex, let's go change the way the organization operates from a holistic perspective. And I think there is this common misconception that, we need to have that fully laid out sustainability plan and with all the actions, all the tools, everything else before we can get started. Sometimes it's as simple as taking a problem and looking at it from a sustainability angle at the same time that you're looking at it from a business and procurement angle. And I always say, like, some of the best examples of sustainable procurement I've personally seen in organizations, in businesses, have actually been ideas that have very strong business cases tied to them that resulted from looking at things from a sustainability angle. One example I can think of is there was an organization that saved millions of dollars annually because they saw an opportunity to actually implement circular economy when it comes to eliminating and recycling a lot of their consumer electronics waste. So by taking a lot of their consumer electronics that were originally going to landfill and actually implementing a circular economy structure to it, they were actually able to reduce their spend very, very, very significantly, and also remove a lot of that waste. And that idea, and I think the idea of sustainability within organizations and sustainable procurement within some of those ideas, it goes to help push our existing procurement organizations, our existing procurement talent pools, to think outside of the box a little bit, to think outside of your typical standard structures of how you basically approach procurement. And when you do that, you actually get a lot of great ideas that come out of that space.
Hey, Jean, just as an adder, so I just go back to the concept of the start. Procurement should not, like, there's a role procurement can play. There's a role procurement is expected to play in the business, and those things are often not the same thing. When it comes to sustainability, if procurement, if depending on how you assess those things, sort of plowing into sustainability is kind of a risk without understanding the role, that's what the expectations are and what's possible in the organization. And we'll get into some of our other questions on how to do it after. But if we don't, like, if the organization itself hasn't said, here's what sustainability means, here's what, you double click into that broader definition, here's what our customers care about, here's what our investors care about, here's what our communities care about, so go through the stakeholder map and say, okay, we as a company, we're going to focus here. Procurement can have a voice in that, but often those things are being led outside of it. So I guess, and then when it gets into, and emissions is a great one that gets it into our supply base. It must get into our supply base. And then how do we use that lever to say, okay, this is emissions, when we try to figure out what we're doing, what our operations are doing, what we control and our suppliers are doing, and we go down the line and suppliers. But we are like, if we should not expect to be driving that agenda. We have to know what matters to the business, what matters to the customer, what matters to those stakeholders. And then in our strategic planning, be ready to go with, okay, here are things that we can do. Here's how we would aim, and get into that conversation. But it's you can't just plot. There will be, if a customer's not willing to pay for it, and procurement's like, yeah, we're going to include all of these sustainability criteria when we go to market, and we come in at higher cost, because often there is a higher cost, and the business is like, why is cost up? I can't pass it on to my customer. We have a bust. So when you have to think end to end from a starting point as well.
And I'm just going to say it's often a higher upfront cost, but
that's
maybe
right,
not a
better life cycle
cost. So best
that's
value
right.
being the key piece there. And I often use the analogy of, a decade ago, IT was this separate function over here somewhere that, those geeky people did stuff. I see an analogy with procurement. So IT today, every business is a technology company today. And I see moving forward, every company is a procurement company. Like, you are only as good as your procurement is. And it's where all the risk is, where the next least cost ton of carbon is. It's just, it's the bee's knees. And it's an opportunity for procurement professionals to really step up and become very core and central to the operation of their organizations.
Somebody told me the other day, they're like, I've never met anybody who is this passionate about procurement in my life. And I'm like, it's such an amazing function. And I think there is something to be said about the procurement function, because we are actually in a very unique position in organizations where we see everything across an organization, and we see everything vertically within an organization. Your procurement function deals with everyone from your operations to your C-suites. And that's the level of bringing that strategy together, bringing those data points together, bringing all of those opportunities together, and collaborating with your business units that really will shape some of the best opportunities within a business, and will help you identify and bring to the surface, and to your point, Tim, help enable a lot of those business strategy drivers, so that we can achieve a lot of those business as sustainable procurement goals. And I think that's really, really important. And so for organizations, I think, that are looking, and for our attendees that are listening today, I say, out of this conversation, definitely go look for understanding your business, understanding what matters. Do you know today, and ask the question to your organizations, what matters today in sustainability? In the industry that you operate in, what are the impacts going to look like? And then look for those opportunities to basically connect those dots together, and start small and snowball from there. I think that's one of the biggest things that I always suggest to people, is start small. And it's a very addictive process. Once you do one or two sustainable procurement projects, people start snowballing, and they're like, I want to do more of that. I want to see more of my procurement projects have a carbon footprint impact, have a human labor impact, have a climate impact. And all of these things, I think, will snowball as they come.
That was actually one of the stakeholders that Tim missed off, which is your own employees, because they absolutely passionately want to do this. And one of the things we often set them up for failure with is asking them to do this work on the side of their desk. There do need to be proper resources put to this. But people are very keen and passionate, and it will increase employee engagement. I don't know, X number, you pick the number, it's huge.
It's a great, thank you for calling me out on that, Miss Francis. It's for my company right now, is we're one of the world's largest lithium, especially chemical mining companies, and we're expanding globally, like literally quadrupling the size of our business in the next 3, 5, 7 years, sort of in that kind of a hockey stick. And one of our biggest challenges is talent, and one of our most exciting opportunities is we are this kind of a company with this kind of a mindset, and we are on the front end of energy. And we find talent really, like, so procurement talent, but broadly talent, wanting to be a part of that excitement, and growth story, and transition to something that feels good, that is a part of, has to be strategically a part of what, in our case, procurement is about going forward. So thank you for bringing that one up. Very important stakeholder.
I think that's an awesome segue into maybe one of the topics that we had talked about that's really a big influence right now. So the evolution of procurement talent. I mean, if we think about procurement and the traditional procurement person, the person who probably thinks I'm super weird for being super passionate about procurement, they have a different view of what procurement is defined as, there are still pockets of businesses out there who see procurement as a very tactical function, who don't see all the different transformations that, we can bring about. And when we're talking about the evolution of talent, I think as procurement individuals, we've always had to kind of wear all these different hats. We've always had to be, you have to be able to define your requirements. You have to be able to project manage. You have to be able to do a financial analysis. You have to be able to negotiate. You have to be a part-time lawyer to be able to assess contracts, and so on and so forth, so on and so forth. And the skill set ever evolves and ever grows. And there are knowledge gaps, I think, that are coming out of sustainable procurement, but I don't think they're not necessarily as large as people seem to think that they are. And when we explore that idea of sustainable procurement, I almost feel like there are organizations and there are individuals out there who feel like, oh, well, I have to be the world's leading sustainability expert to be able to do sustainable procurement. And I don't think that's the case necessarily at all. So, when we start to explore the idea of how is talent going to evolve in this space, and how does that look like within some of the clients and some of the spaces that both of you have touched, I'd love for you guys to share a little bit more on that.
Sure, I can jump in with a little bit of a precursor. So next Wednesday on the 17th, we'll actually be working with an organization called Green Economy Canada. I will make sure you get a copy sent through your organization here. The results of an 18-month pilot that we did with broader public sector, but I think it's applicable across organizations. What does it take to advance the practice of sustainable IT procurement in this case, but again, applicable across commodities, I say. And it's not rocket science. What we've learned is if you could just put the procurement, the sustainability, and the line of business person in the room and have some guided conversations, good things happen. And it's often because we all work in lines of business and we're all too busy and we don't cross-fertilize. And it's quite simple. Some of these recommendations are very simple. So I'll make sure you get a copy of this report and can read it at your leisure.
So Jane, this is just as a topic area. I sit on ISM's Thought Leadership Council in Canada. I'm moving to the US, but in Canada, I'm on a advisory board for sustainable business with CPA Canada. Internationally, I'm on the International Federation of Accountants, Professional Accountants and Business Advisory Board. One of the top 2 or 3 topics everywhere is talent, and whether it's procurement, it's finance, it's broadly. What you described, I think it's very generous to say that even a small portion of the population can do what you describe up front, in terms of that being that sort of the specialist, but a generalist that is able to do all of those end-to-end things. And this is just my point of view. When I've led a number of procurement transformations now, and talent, it is very difficult to find talent to compete the right way. So we find we have to build them, and so we look for foundations that are ambitious. That like, I don't think it's necessarily, as you say, it's not rocket science what we do, but it is to be able to take what perhaps an old skill of buying and that expectation, and how that it's we have really smart people with really good educations who have sort of been pigeonholed into this view of the business has of procurement or purchasing, which is you're an order taker and go and do that and do this day-to-day stuff. And if you have time and interest to sort of go and ask some more strategic questions or get in the operation or understand the business, understand the supply market better and bring in innovation. Like when we tell our folks, you need to go do that as a part of your strategic job, they often get hammered down by the business, or we don't give them the time, or we stick them with low value activities, transactional stuff, day-to-day stuff. We don't create new capacity for them to do this stuff. And so we start with this sort of foundation that is quite difficult to deal with as a starting point. Then we roll in, new like things that are really impacting our function in our business today and expecting them to do it. And it is a very tough spot to put our people in. And it's a spot as leaders that we have to try to lead our function out of. And the old skills it took to buy and be an order taker are not the new core skills from a business partnering perspective, from a leadership, presentation and communication, more negotiation, influencing without authority, collaboration skills, the kinds of things. Like, it's not about sustainable procurement. The talent conversation isn't about that. That can be picked up. It is broadly, how do we, if you think about the function creating value or facilitating value creation, what kind of team members do we need and what skill sets do they have? And how do we integrate sustainability as one of the 20 things that they're bringing to the table that's strategic with the business and for the enterprise? So when I look at the talent challenges we have, it is finding those foundations. It's making sure we have the right programs, that we bring the sustainability conversation in a way that matters to the business, predict what's going to matter as standards are changing globally, market by market. The sustainability opportunities are different. We now have, thankfully, last week, a new International Sustainability Standards Board announced. But so that we might get to some more harmonized standards globally, but every place you go, there's something, depending on your industry, there's something for your team member to know. And if we don't give them time, if we don't have the right foundations, if we don't sort of stop this legacy posture that we have in businesses, we're going to have a hard time being successful as a function, adopting something else strategic that they're expected to do. So that's a bit of a soapbox, but it is our biggest issue is talent by far.
No, 100%. And I think, when we think about talent and we think about the way that talent has evolved, we talked about this a little bit, I think a couple of times, sometimes procurement gets caught in firefighting, and there's fires happening and people are like, okay, I want to be strategic. I want to be, I want to build those strategies. I want to bring that area of influence, et cetera, but I'm currently putting out 5,001 fires and you're asking me to build a fence and I'm sitting in a house that's burning down. So I think there is an element there with talent evolution where we need to enable our people so that they are empowered and they're not in a house that's necessarily on fire, so that they can focus on building that fence in the backyard, so that they can focus on designing that fence in the backyard. And there's I think when we look at the talent transformation, when we look at the talent evolution, that is where we're going to see a lot of organizations put a lot of focus on how do we streamline our operations so we remove all of the noise and we have our procurement talent start to focus on the key things that make sense. And what I loved about what you said, Tim, was, bring the sustainability conversation in a way that resonates with your business units. And I think that's always been what we've needed to do as procurement. And when we have teams deployed with clients and with business units working as their functional procurement team. And so one of the big things is, we have mandates that focus on cost savings, but your business unit doesn't necessarily care about cost savings. What they care about is, operational uptime. How fast are you getting me my services? All of these things. So understanding what resonates with your business and being able to communicate and tie that back with your goals and your objectives in terms of the project that you're trying to push forward, I think is one of those critical procurement skills that can actually be extended to sustainability. So now it's not just connect the dots between cost savings and their business objectives, but connect the dots between cost savings, business objectives, and your sustainability objectives. And you can kind of start to paint that picture, integrate it all.
And let's throw another one in there, which is, where is your customer going? because we know the next least cost ton is in the supply chain. And, look at what the UK government just did, right? In order to be able to bid on this, you have to have measured your carbon and disclosed and set a Paris-based target. So pretty soon your customers are going to be asking you to do this. So a procurement person who's already ahead of this and thinking about it and getting the supply chain, your own supply chain under control, is actually proving their strategic worth in the business even more, and being forward thinking and predictive of this. And just sort of reflecting back on that talent discussion, that in a recent presentation from the UK government, what they said was the prediction is they're going to run out of supply chain sustainability professionals because the demand is going to be so high and big. So, either retraining your own people to learn more about this, or getting yourself some sustainability people who can lean in and help you now is probably strategic, because there won't be many left on the shelf moving forward, because there'll be a big demand.
I think when it comes to the marketplace, and when you have the PwCs coming in for 100,000 sustainability people globally, and have really foreshadowing, or not even foreshadowing, I mean, where they're doing it now, you get a sense. You get a sense of the commercial opportunity that's ahead for the talent, and in making. This is one of the conversations about what is the job of the future. What is the professional capability that I should go. I have kids that are in university, about to go to university, and it's like, where is it going? And at the same time, I'm sitting on, with a bunch of accountants and one bunch of supply chain and procurement people who, like, we're getting into, technology's taking our jobs, and it's like, no, there's this massive pivot that's happening in what was valued from this over to some other things, and sustainability is one of those other big areas, like in large swaths that we have to get. Obviously many other digital things. There's lots of sort of places where it's going, but I think it's gonna be a great spot for folks to aim their careers at, or for at least to stop in their careers at. And that's what I'm trying to sell from a procurement function perspective, is like, look, you want to feel good about a position. We want to do great work. We're on the future of energy. This is a great spot to develop a bunch of skill sets, as Jane laid out, and those end-to-end skill sets are really unique to procurement to develop and supply chain to develop, and you get the sustainability experience. It's a fantastic place to be, but it's just you got to do a lot of selling and storytelling with talent to get them here.
Yeah, it's like there was at one point, I think I was speaking to the area chair of post-secondary here, and we were saying, essentially, in the undergraduate degrees in business school, it's no longer marketing, accounting, and finance. It's now marketing, finance, and then supply chain. Like it's becoming such a big focus, and there are so many people who are actually getting interested. And I think, seeing procurement and seeing sustainability as an embedded function in an organization, and to your point earlier, Francis, really having that understanding that procurement is the way of the future. Like every single business is going to need to buy. And if we can transform how businesses buy, if the organizations that are buying right now, they can change their buying behavior. If consumers can change their buying behaviors, businesses can change their buying behaviors. And I think that's fundamentally something that we can definitely help and push in that respect.
Well, and I guess COVID's given us a little bit of breathing space too, because even if you want to buy some things, you can't buy them right now. So
that's why I live with logistics every day, challenges. I would say just with respect to the cycle time between what a buyer, what an individual buyer expects as a consumer versus what's possible in a business, technologies make it, is closing that cycle time. So COVID has accelerated that massively, I think, in terms of the switch and the opportunity and the expectation for us to be able to adjust.
When I think about what Jane said about the profession being one of the few professions that goes across the lines of business, I would have said sustainability is the only other line of business that does that, with the difference that sustainability is always trying to get people to do things they don't want to do, and procurement have people coming to you because they need you to do something. And so that, we exist as golden threads that tie everything together, but with a slightly different emphasis on, at least from a procurement standpoint, people have to come to you, right? So you're a little step ahead of where the sustainability profession is.
Well, some people still find workarounds, right?
Oh, of course, of course.
Everyone will try to find those bypasses, but we're changing those behaviors step by step. Absolutely. And, it's interesting because, Francis, one of the things I know we both talked about quite a bit was around collaboration and this evolution of how businesses interface with their suppliers. And, Tim, I know you've been at the forefront of a lot of changes and technology adoptions that have really been pushed around more further transparency within organizations with their suppliers. And I think if we think about traditional procurement and, dare I say, traditional public procurement, a little bit legacy type of framework, there was always this concept of like, let's try to limit the amount of information we share. We're being very controlled about what we do share. And these days, when we look at how fast the world is moving, how transformative the world is moving, and when we look at, where the expertise sits in terms of certain industries, in terms of certain operations, I think we see an opportunity to really collaborate and leverage your suppliers for more than just what they're contracted to provide to you. And I think HP is a very good example of that, where I'm never going to be a print sustainability expert. I don't intend on becoming a printer sustainability expert. But what I do think is you have a dedicated department of individuals who are specifically focused on how do you make your specific line of business more sustainable. So if I engage in a dialogue and a conversation with you that specifically ties back to the type of spend that I'm doing when I'm working on my printers, I think I'm going to see so much more insight out of you than if I personally try to go and find and develop all of this knowledge myself. And I think that's a very interesting evolution of how we interface with our suppliers.
It's when I just came off teaching a 3-hour master's level class in sustainability, and one of the things I'm constantly emphasizing is, the old role of business or organizations in terms of, you're there from a competitive standpoint, you have your niche, and this is where you play, is as we move forward into the circular and just economy that we actually want, the types of collaboration, the radical collaboration that is going to be needed, not only in the types of things that Tim was talking about in the metrics that we need and the tools and new things that we need to develop to get us to this low carbon just economy, just who the natural competitors are going to have to be collaborators. We're going to have to collaborate across all levels of non-traditional boundaries. And it's quite encouraging in many ways, because it's a whole brave new world. We're going to need a whole bunch of new skill sets. So the kinds of people we need to hire are going to be very different. But that was the message I left with the students today, was everything has to change. When we look at the goals that HP has, 75% product circularity, full value chain, 50% reduction by 2030 and net zero by 2040. Like, there isn't a single area of our business that isn't going to have to change as a result of those 2 goals alone. And then there are many more goals on top of that. So flex those collaboration, those ability to ask questions, to not feel afraid to go to vendors and say, well, I'd like to do this. That's actually one of the biggest things we found out of the case study, was that there's this perception that if you start to add any criteria in, you'll be sole sourcing, which for public sector is obviously a big no-no, because they don't actually understand where the market's at. From a tech industry, we're actually quite far ahead of many other businesses in terms of what we're doing from a sustainability standpoint. And if your vendor isn't able to tell you, let me just leave you with this one piece. You cannot be sustainable if you are not transparent. Transparency is the new tool. And so if a vendor says, well, I don't have that information, or I can't give it to you, then you need to move on to the next one, because it's a benchmark today. You absolutely have to be transparent in as many things as you can. And it's not I use the word knee-jerk reaction, but it's not an intuitive thing in most business people to be transparent. We have to beat that into them. And as procurement people, we can do that.
I think it's a great point. I like the image of that, Francis. I think so the doing this is the trick. We all agree that the sort of the message of the world, and I think things have gotten a lot more constructive in conversation more recently, as we take a really objective view of what's going on. And And I think the starting point is fairly well set on getting to an understanding that this matters. Now, if you know, from the lens of procurement, understanding what matters in the business and how to, sorry if I have background noise, there's a little screaming person. But if we look at what matters to the business, what matters to the enterprise, what priorities are we going to try to have impact with and on for our customer and perhaps an end customer, and then from a procurement design perspective, we can, if we can, or we have to get ourselves sort of in the position of designing an interaction with the business, and then designing therefore an interaction with our supply market that we are responsible for. So if somebody says, how do you at the end of the day, if we can get everybody aligned around, an end customer wants to know, they want to be able to scan a QR code and know what happened end to end and getting me my product or my service. What is procurement's role at doing that? And our role is to take a demand signal, take what matters to the customer, and hopefully maybe we already went to the market proactively and encountered innovative suppliers or discovered things that we thought might be coming, but we're on top of it. But even if we're reactive to, we have this demand signal, how are we discovering behaviors? How do we create that radical transparency? Or at least we have suppliers that will think it's radical, but we got the message somehow from our customers. They're going to get it from their customer, which is us, and we as the procurement professional have a job to do to facilitate that. But the tools, as I said earlier, what matters for a particular business unit in a particular region for a particular outcome for a customer and a customer's end customer is going to be a bit different. And we, not only do we have to know how to discover well-behaving suppliers or performance managing, developing suppliers, creating more competition, as Francis said, that there isn't a supplier that can do it, that can behave well, isn't really a choice. We have to, we have to be able to start with where are they, and then if we can get them there, then we must, and if we can't, then we have to move on. Those kinds of exercises take a different skill set, a different strategy, different mindset. But the idea of what is our role in responsible management in our business and of our suppliers, and what matters, where does it matter, to whom, which stakeholder does it matter, and then make a value determination and trade-off to say, here is where we start. Emissions matters most. So I know that for this business unit that's driving 80% of our 90% of our market share today, valuation today, I know that for these 5 categories, I need to really beef up what I am, my considerations, my criteria, my RFX, my evaluation, my negotiation. Everything has to incorporate as a part of it these requirements that matter to the business, and to those stakeholders, all that list of stakeholders that we talked about earlier. So I think from it, and when you find the right suppliers, you're gonna have to really lean in with them, because as you said, Jane, they can innovate way faster than we can. They focus all day, every day on trying to figure out how to add value for us, or they should. And they need to know from us what matters and what's going to matter 1, 3, 5 years down the road. So it's essential, this collaboration and responsibility. And then they have to take it to their suppliers. And, you get into the emissions discussion and how far down can we realistically go. That's really front of mind right now for a lot of businesses. So I'll stop talking.
No, and if I can just add on that, if we think about getting to the circular economy, it's about services. And really, that means you are actually getting into bed with your supplier, because you're on a long, it's not a one-time thing, right? You are now in bed for a given period of time. And so that vendor management of how do services work better, blah, 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 it's a key component of the circular economy. So I'm happy to hear you talk about that, Tim.
I think it's wonderful, because when you start to think about, supplier management And when you start to think about the skill sets that are required to really enable this within organizations, enable some of these opportunities and enact some of these opportunities. And I know we're going back to the talent conversation, but there are so many transferable skills from solid, strong procurement foundations that are going to tie and push very easily into sustainable procurement, that can already push sustainable procurement. I think that's one of the biggest things that I want our attendees to really think about. It's you currently have, if you're working in procurement today, if you're working in supply chain today, you have skill sets that today can be leveraged to drive sustainability. When we're talking about developing our suppliers a little bit more, when we're talking about identifying those suppliers that have the sustainability opportunity and then developing those relationships, that is something that we currently do with all of our strategic suppliers. That is something, if you're currently working on developing, whether it's, Aboriginal content with some of your suppliers, whether it's smaller supplier that you're trying to develop a secondary source for so that you have a secondary supplier for one of your sole source categories, those are all skill sets that you can then immediately today, tomorrow, start to apply towards. If you've identified a supplier who has a sustainability opportunity, you can start developing that with that supplier tomorrow and start to have those conversations, just like you do with all of those other aspects of procurement, which I think is one of the coolest things about what we do.
But should be, and it can be, but it gets back to the skill set. What does it take to identify the right supplier, strategize about what the right conversation is with them, execute a multi-channel communication strategy to be able to develop what matters in a world where they might be starting from square one also, and try to create a sense of urgency for them on why it matters to them when you might be the only customer saying this to them at the moment, and they have to make decisions about what they're focusing on. So it is, the influencing, like it just gets back to the talent conversation. But I do think one of the messages for anybody in procurement, if you start researching or getting, trying to figure out what's coming for your business and trying to be more proactive and have a different mindset that is innovative. There's a lot of this stuff that has been voluntary for your businesses to date. I think there's a massive shift coming to what is going to be mandatory. And when that shift happens, you need to know a lot about your supply chain. You need to know a lot about your supply partners. You're going to, if you have a very long bench of suppliers, a very long tail that you're doing business with, you're going to have to figure out which ones really matter for this conversation. And you're going to want to get ahead of it. And you're not behind probably, but this you should be trying to figure out how to get this in your strategies now and in your work plans for 2022 and beyond today, because it's the mandatory stuff is going to take hold here, and I think in the very near future. Obviously, it is on emissions, but when you get into jurisdiction by jurisdiction, around cyber, around fraud and corruption, human rights, modern slavery, child labor, some of the other circular things in addition to emissions that Francis mentioned. There are very sensitive parts of this planet that this is top of mind, and regulations are coming that may impact your business, that you can really position yourself as a key voice and a key execution partner for your business if you get ahead of it.
I'm just going to throw on top of that, Government of New Zealand just awarded a IT procurement contract. 40% of the points were on sustainability. 40%. This is not chump change anymore. This is serious business. UK government, you can't do business unless you've declared disclose your full carbon footprint. It's not coming, it's here. Right? So you better be ready.
Yep.
Absolutely. So I do want to open a little bit more time to our attendees. If you have any questions, please do feel free to use the Q&A box. Take advantage of this time that we have here together for another couple of minutes that we can address any outstanding questions. But in the meantime, I would like to leave maybe on this topic, and just to close it off, a couple of key actions that we would recommend for any attendee of today, or any business, any organization, to start thinking about and to start taking action within their space. So I can maybe go first, because I know I'm kind of springing it on both of you, but essentially, when we look at going back into our operations, when we look at starting the sustainable procurement journey, I think the first thing and the first and foremost thing is to really look at your opportunities in a different lens. Go back to your desk, open up your contracts, open up your opportunities, open up your procurement planning, understand what it is that your business cares about, and then look at those opportunities from that angle and start to question, not from the reactive side of you where you say, okay, this contract is coming up for expiration. Here's all the procurement steps I'm supposed to do. Here's all the different activities I'm supposed to do. This is as I'm starting to build out my sourcing strategy, to really start from zero, which is, okay, if this opportunity is coming up, is there a different way that I could approach it? How can I think about some of the procurement challenges here? And I think a lot of our folks will probably be very surprised by some of the innovation that gets sparked out of challenging themselves from that way. And it's something that we keep encouraging procurement teams to do regardless, to look at problems differently, look at problems in a different manner, to challenge the way that the current existing contract structures are set up, challenge the way your existing suppliers are set up. Are they still relevant for how your business is going to operate today, 3 years, 5 years from now? So I think that is one of the first steps that I would encourage anybody to do when they sign out of this webinar and go back to their desks and open up the second tab on their second screen there.
So I'm going to jump in and follow up on that, which is, you said a different lens. I often ask people to, we as procurement are very focused on the dollar, right? But I'm going to ask you to put a different pair of glasses on that has one lens on dollar and one lens on carbon. We're in the decade of climate action. You should not be taking any dollar decision without thinking of a carbon overlay on top of it. And you might not have all the data to be able to make it very accurate, but you can do some proxies very well. So I just encourage you to put that pair of glasses on, carbon and dollars. Focus on that definition that Jane mentioned, because it's about all of the elements. It's not buying one hero product that is greener and will solve all your problems. It's about everything you do. And for our Canadian friends, again, not only do we have the white paper coming out next week, but the following week, I was on the expert panel on the circular economy for the Canadian federal government. There's a report coming out on that, which I think might have some procurement ideas in it as well. So watch for that as well.
And Jane, for me, it's a mindset. So I think to build on what each of you said, and I think the value and the value creation, facilitation opportunity that we have as a function starts with the mindset that we have a major role to play. And everything that we, when we think about all the things that you mentioned, from especially, so if I, as a starting point, in a lot of organizations are trying to organize their sustainability strategy around a number of, they triangulate and say, okay, we'll adopt the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. And of those goals, of the 17, 9 matter to us when we look at our business. And then as a procurement function, you're as a function anyways, regardless of those things, we say, okay, what is our spend and with whom? What's most important to the business? What important contracts do we have? What's coming up? What's changing in the marketplace? And then you say, okay, through that lens that you just said, how do we triangulate and say, okay, these are the things that seem to matter. And of course, in strategy, the other side of the coin is risk. Are there things that may not be in there that when we apply that lens, accelerate value creation around the opportunities, but also expose risks that might not have been in the top, maybe the last 5 or 10 years or the last 1 or 2 years post, COVID really has changed a lot of things. Maybe those things are different today. When I apply a sustainability lens as a part of my strategy, does it expose the top 20 things are replaced by 5 other things that with this lens now really we need to get our eye on and make sure that we execute the right way through our sourcing, sourcing, buying, supplier management kinds of activities. So, but if we don't go in with this mindset that we can do something about it, that we play a leadership role, we touch the dollars. And because we touch the dollars, we can influence what our suppliers do and what they care about and how they behave, and we can allocate work differently as long as we identify early how that might work. If we have to add new suppliers, And there's tools for risk management, for monitoring, for qualification, for discovery. We have we're using a supplier discovery tool that's based on AI and machine learning that can help us find things, help us identify certifications, help us identify good suppliers for the right things in the right regions of the world. There's ways to be able to make it easier to do, but it has to start with the mindset, the strategy, the process, and the governance. And we just have to believe we can do something about this, and that it is value for our function. That we just a great new opportunity. This is 15 years ago when I was in investor relations. I was in a world-class function of IR and sustainability, and we were recognized as this, but it was like nobody really cared that much. It was like we reported some nice fuzzy things. I would say that we were in the extractive industry. It mattered to us because we believed it mattered to our investors, and it did. But today it is massively different. Like now sustainability is going to have the next 3 decades is going to be owned by sustainability. That's a long time. That's a generation. That's a career for a lot of people in the space. And so when you think of it that way, and you think about procurement being able to tie itself to this, that is very exciting for our function. So I think that let's not miss this opportunity to really hit it.
We can purchase the future we want.
That's right. That's great. Love it. Yep.
I like that. Can we coin that and put that on a shirt?
Yeah.
Let's purchase the future that we want. And I really love that. All right. So I guess to close ourselves out, I think one of the things I do want to provide to everyone who did attend and to those who weren't able to attend, who were probably going to be watching the recording, will be a set of tools to kind of enable that. And I know, Francis, you've mentioned a lot of white papers and things like that you've shared out. One of the things our firm has put out is a database that has been built to link back sustainable purchasing ideas and sustainable purchasing roadmaps on a case-by-case basis, category by category, linking back to the UN SDGs. So to your point, Tim, I don't think any one organization, any one specific category of spend is going to impact all 17 SDGs in one go. But what we do want to do is help organizations identify if that opportunity is coming up, if they have an opportunity coming up in cleaning supplies, in print, in, lighting, whatever it is, what is the specific set of opportunities and potential sustainable purchasing opportunities that they can go back and they can start to implement today as an actionable project within their organizations. And that's something that our organization has built out, and that we'll be definitely providing a link to for everyone else within that's going to be attending the webinar as well. Anything that you guys would like to highlight and share with anybody else with the folks on the call as well?
Well, there is a free resource called circularprocurement.ca that we've helped fund, and I will definitely include some links to some sustainable IT purchasing guides and a self-assessment tool that I've developed along with this green economy organization that really was quite eye-opening for a lot of organizations that felt they would do. It's like, I guess, like driving. Everybody thinks they're doing it well, but then when you really ask the questions, oh, maybe not, maybe, and then what's the art of the possible? Because again, there's not everybody had sustainability education, so they don't know. So I'll hopefully provide those tools for you.
Wonderful.
And I would say, Jane, from my perspective, look, this is an ISM presentation. ISM broadly is doing work on this from the procurement and supply chain lens. And I go back to, and I know you sort of dissed the accountants earlier, Jane, but as the flip from accounting to supply chain, I think you said, but I do think the accountants are trying to figure out what role they have in the future world. And you will find at CPA Canada, you'll find it at IFAC, the International Federation of Accountants, Professional Accountants in Business, a lot of work on this because they are influencing standard setting. And those standards are what we're all going to be measured to as a business. And so there's a ton of resources and a ton of links to thought leadership, to other standard setters globally, that sort of thing, that are going to matter a great deal. And I would say, just as a last thing, the things, like carbon neutral, quote unquote, carbon neutral by 2050. You're hearing a lot of carbon neutral by 2050. I think that is going to be sped up, and businesses are going to be accelerating those objectives because stakeholders are going to require them to And so again, just don't underestimate. This is a real topic and a real opportunity for us sooner than later.
60% of HP's carbon footprint is in our supply chain. Only 1% is in our own operations. So it really is about what you're bringing in. The fastest way to green your organization is to buy from one that's already done it. So pretty important. HP net zero by 2040. And you're right, with all the pressure from COP, the COP conference that's going on in Glasgow, you're seeing this thing that 2050 is way too far out, and that we need to see near to, at least by 2030, 50% reductions. And that's where most organizations are starting to head to. So, yep.
Stretch. Yep.
Stretch. Why not? Purchase the future that you want to live in. There you go.
We have some questions coming up here.
No, just a lot of thank yous, which, is fantastic to hear. And at the end of the day, I think we're at time. So any last thoughts or comments you guys want to leave everyone with?
I'm good. I thought I just gave mine. So I'm good. Jen.
Well, there you go. And thank you guys so much for attending. And thank you so much to the ISM New Jersey for putting all of this together. And for both of you for sharing the stage today.
Thank you for hosting us. Take
Of course,
care.
Jane. Thank you.
Have a good day,
Thanks,
everyone.
Kathy.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.